How much does a dispensary make is a question that I'm asked all the time as a cannabis industry lawyer. So we take a deep dive into answering that question on this episode of How to Cannabis on Cannabis Legalization News. Thanks for watching. I'm Tom, a cannabis industry lawyer you can find by Googling cannabis lawyer or something else like this video's title and finding my law blog, cannabisindustrylawyer.com. We've helped people get their dispensary licenses in several states and hopefully soon yours. Our clients want in on the cash flows that they have heard so much about that come from owning a dispensary. So let's answer the question of how much a dispensary makes. First, we need to talk about averages and specifics, so we understand why people want to get a dispensary so badly that tens of thousands of people are applying for a license which only a select few seem to be able to get. You see, how much a dispensary owner makes in a year is not a one-size-fits-all answer. Some states restrict the number of licenses, which makes the cash flows in their financial models far more accurate because new competition can't spring up and eat their market share. Other states allow for competition, and so the financial models in those states may be a little more than a pipe dream for your investors. How much your dispensary can make really depends on the state that you operate in, and the data really underscores this fact. So when we talk about the average, know that certain states are really pulling up those numbers, and states that have unlimited competition may actually have dispensaries earning negative money, which is a terrible way to run a business, by the way. Now, we're gonna go over some good states to run a dispensary and some bad states to run a dispensary. Bad news first. The worst state to open a dispensary is one of those that has the most dispensaries per capita, so you have the most competition. Let's take a look at those numbers.
All right, let's go over the dispensaries per capita in the United States. This was brought out by Greenlight. Actually, it was done by Verilife, and so Verilife is a multi-state operator. They have states in Illinois, and you can see the highest per capita is in Oregon, and then Oklahoma, Montana, Colorado, Alaska, Washington State. You can actually make a pretty good, cash flow in Washington State. California, that's pretty interesting. It seems like there's way fewer in California, but that could just be because of the differences between adult use and medical. Illinois, just there's barely anybody there, literally none in Texas. And so these would be the good states to own a cannabis dispensary. For example, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, maybe one day New York. But it's very difficult to get one. Florida, for example, would be a good state. California, it appears to be a pretty good state. I know people in Washington that do pretty well as well. It can be more difficult to make it in Oregon and Oklahoma unless you're vertical because of how many dispensaries there are per 100,000 people.
And there you go. So how much does a dispensary owner make? According to MJBizDaily, owners tend to make about 10 to 20% of net income, which means they can be over $2 million in states with a lot of sales and very few dispensaries like Illinois, or maybe less than $100,000 in states like Oregon or Oklahoma. What about these large publicly traded MSOs? Let's take, for example, Verano, because I have its annual report from 2021 right here. What's an annual report? Well, it's something that publicly traded companies must file. The bigger your cannabis company gets, the greater your cost of compliance. So let's look at their numbers.
Okay, dokie smoky. So here's the Verano annual report, and I have not only bookmarked it with a case about due process, that'll come up in later episodes, but also dog-eared it here. I want to go over some of these pieces of data. This is their segments of all the revenues and expenses that they had, and you can see that the money is in thousands except of shares and per share amounts, and so every dollar figure that's there, you really have to put a comma and then 3 more zeros behind it. For example, they did almost $737,850 million of total revenue. And that means that out of that, the vast majority of it, you can see right there, is in retail. That's right, it's retail of almost $600,000, which of course you have to remember is actually 600 million, and cultivation was in wholesale of only $218 million. Let's see what they made on that. Well, let's see, they paid a lot of income taxes. They almost paid the exact same amount of income taxes on wholesale as they did to retail, even though retail did 3 times the revenue on it. That's interesting. And then let's look at look at that. They lost money both in total, but then also they lost money on their retail segment. And isn't that something? I mean, how can something in a state like Illinois, one of the states that has the highest price per pound at wholesale, it's approximately $3,800, actually lose money? Even though they're making so much revenue, almost $600 million in revenue, and they're still losing about $72 million. Well, maybe the state of Illinois' chart that they provided for how Verano grows so fast. You can see how it's grown so fast from, just look at its explosion of retail. They bought a lot of dispensaries all over the country. And see this? Look at all these LLCs. Verano Holdings Corp. And then there's all these LLCs holding logistics, dispensary holding. Boy, they're just, they have been on a tear. They're buying all sorts of things. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Illinois has provided this exhibit for how to do a transaction where you purchase a dispensary. You see, this is what the state of Illinois thinks a normal pre-transaction organizational structure looks like. Principal officers of ABC Corp., principal officers of 123 Corp., principal officers of DEF LLC, and you can see that the ABC Corp owns the 123 Corp., which owns the DCEF Corp., which then owns Dispensary A, and then there's Dispensary B. Mary Anonymous has already been bought out of Dispensary A. Now she's going for Dispensary B. It's pretty interesting that Mary Anonymous is right there, and then who owns this one? Joey Tribbiani, Rachel Green, Ross Geller, and Chandler Bing. Sound like a pretty white group of friends right there. As opposed to these principal officers, we have Michael Scott, Dwight Stroop, Pam Halpert, and an Oscar Martinez. Well, at least they have a Martinez in there. And then we have the Smiths and the Does. Nobody can keep up with the Smiths and the Does. But let's scroll down and see the summary of the transaction. See, she sells 100% of the dispensary equity to this DCF LLC, and then afterwards, now the ownership works like this, and Mary Anonymous is no longer in the picture. And that's how you pass a loss, because you have all these people that need to get their beaks wet.
Back to it. How much does a dispensary make? Dispensary owners earn, on average, a salary of about $200,000. While dispensaries can make well into the millions of dollars a year, those only really happen in states where it's almost impossible to open a dispensary. And we've won dispensaries in states like that before. If you want to learn more about how to open a cannabis business, subscribe to this channel and tune into our podcast, Legalization News, where we explain the cannabis laws so that you can change them. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you when it is 420 somewhere. Unique, New York.